Well, hi everybody. This is Al Spath from Positive Poker Insiders. Today's guest is Ashley Adams, coming from Boston, Massachusetts. Ashley is the author of two great books, Winning No Limit Hold'em, that he produced back in 2012, and Winning Seven Card Stud back 2003. And I believe he's still the host of House of Cards, which has over 50,000 listeners every week. Is that true, Ashley? And welcome.
Well, thank you. I can't speak to how many listeners we have. I've been told the same number, about 50,000. But yes, we are on every week on Yahoo Sports, which is syndicated at 130 or 40 stations around the United States at midnight on Saturday night. And then we have 10 other stations that are broadcasting the show at different times. And of course, we're available on the internet as well as a podcast. So thank you for the chance to sell my show.
No, that's great. No, it's great that there's more. There'll be more shows out there. It'd be wonderful for people because I know people are always searching the internet for things that are out there that they can listen to in the car or on an airplane or something like that. So you do a great service to those that are playing poker. But let's take this back to the beginning. You grew up in New York. Where about in New York did you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island, Nassau County, and then Albany, New York, my last 2 years of high school before going to college in Massachusetts.
Okay, so Massachusetts is the home now, and so is it Yankees, Red Sox?
I grew up as a Yankee fan, and I am loyal to my team in spite of all of the people who surround me trying to tell me I'm nuts.
Well, I feel your pain, especially when they just lost two straight to the Red
I know,
Sox.
I know, but it's funny. I am to me the ideal type of fan. I am very happy when they win, and when they lose, who cares? It's only a game.
And they're going to lose a lot this year. that's
Maybe, maybe.
that's the problem. They don't seem to have a very good team at all. So let's turn to poker.
Okay.
And you're married. You've been playing poker for 47 years. I think I calculated it out. I seen her.
More than that, actually, I learned poker from my grandfather when I was about five, maybe six. So that would have been 1962 and 63.
Yes.
We're now talking 50 plus years,
Yeah.
50 years.
I know. I learned from my dad at Orchard Beach in the Bronx. In fact, he taught me pinochle, single deck, two handed to start me out with. That's how tough it was to start out with cards.
So you're from New York too. See, I pinochle is the one game I never learned from either my grandfather or my stepfather who raised me. I think of him as my dad. They taught me. I wonder if you know this game. Do you know how to play Pisha Pesha?
I've heard of it, but I've never played it. No.
Okay, well, we learned fish, Pisha Pesha, casino.
Casino with the 10 of diamonds.
That's right. Gin rummy, cribbage, hearts,
Yes.
lots of other games, but not pinochle. Isn't that interesting?
And when I was in the service and I was stationed over in Thailand and Southeast Asia for a year, I played so much double deck pinochle that on days when it was really overcast and our missions didn't fly, so we didn't have. I was in photography, so combat camera. We didn't have aerial photography that was coming in from the F4s at that time. So we would had downtown. We played pinochle over at the NCO club for maybe 3 days at a time. Sometimes we'd take a break and sleep on a couch there and get back to it. It was double deck. It was 50 cents a point, dollar a set, $5 a game, and that was a
Wow.
lot of money back in '72.
Yeah, I'm saying that's not cheap. That's serious money.
Yeah, that was serious money back then. Then we played cribbage, and it was double. It was double also if you got skunked. If you play cribbage, you know what that means.
Yep.
So, we go back. We're from the old school. We play seven card stud. I know that you wrote that book back in it was 2003. I think
Yep.
it was, yeah. And that's winning seven card stud. All your books, your two books there. I don't know if you have another book. I looked up and I didn't see another book, but
No,
both of them winning
I
seven
have
card
other
stud.
books I've appeared in. I've written chapters or stories, and I'm writing another one now about my travels around the United States. But those are the only two published books right now.
And I can tell everybody that I have written a review on the No Limit Hold'em. If anybody wants that review, they can email me at alspath@alspath.com, and I'm going to submit it again to Ante Up Magazine, who I write for, and see if they'll run that again for me in the next couple of months. I've already submitted several months out of articles and everything.
Yes,
So,
I know. I attribute a lot of my sales to your positive review, Al, and I appreciate it.
oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. I wouldn't say anything in those reviews if I didn't believe it. I wouldn't, keep telling people to buy a certain book. I tell them to buy after tournament players winning tournaments one hand at a time that Matthew Hilger put out when he owned Dymat
Right?
Publications. Since he sold that, since he went to Isle of Man, he sold his interest in Dymat Publications, and he had some very good books that he used to put out as well. Internet
Right.
Texas Hold'em, named one of them, and Poker Mindset, things like that.
I
But
have them all.
let's get back to your book here.
Okay.
Um, your stud book, which was the first book, it's a dying discipline out there. It seems like it's hard to find a seven stud. Now you're at Foxwoods, right nearby. How often can you get into a stud game at Foxwoods?
Oh, well, Foxwoods is the last real bastion of stud in the United States, in the world. Uh, there's always a stud game. There are always at least uh, 4 or 5 low stakes stud games, 1 to 5, 1 to 3. There are usually a couple of 5-10 games, at least one, usually two. Sometimes there's a 10-20, and there are always at least one or two 20-40 games and a 75-150 game, believe it or not, always runs. Sometimes a few of them, and sometimes a 153. So there's always stud. I have eschewed the stud game because I find these days that 1-2 no limit is by far more profitable. 1-2 no limit hold'em, and I tend to frequent those games, if not the 2-5 game, because it's more profitable than the stud games.
I was just in Atlantic City about 2 weeks ago at the Borgata, and there was big signs along the highway that said the Taj was opening up the poker room again, and they were cutting it down to, I believe it said 26 tables, so half as many tables they had before. But the word at the tables at the Borgata was primarily they were going to bring back the stud game because the stud game died in Atlantic City, and there was a lot of people that still wanted that Taj stud game that was very popular, the 2040 and the 4080. So
Right.
that's what's happening there, and around the rest of the country, unless you go probably to a big metropolis like, you know, Los Angeles or Vegas, you're not going to find too many stud games out there.
No, you won't. In fact, even in Los Angeles, I mean, you get it at the Commerce. You may get a stud 8 game at the Bike. Maybe you'll find it occasionally a lower stakes game at Hollywood Park, but there's really very little else around. They used to have one outside of Louisville. Caesars in Southern Indiana had a 30-60 game that only ran from Friday until Monday. And then in Florida, there are a few places that still have some legacy low stakes games, 1 to 5 or so. And you might find an occasional 1 to 5 game at Sam's Town in Las Vegas, and maybe occasionally a 20-40 game at the Bellagio. But that's about it. It's hard to find.
Yeah, that's true. What drew you to stud in the first place, rather than go to Hold'em? And back then it was limit Hold'em. It really wasn't no limit Hold'em. It wasn't
Right,
that big.
right, right. Well, when I learned, of course, I didn't learn how to play Hold'em until the casino opened. I read Ed Silberstein's book. Ed Silberstein was a wonderful friend of mine, and maybe the greatest writer and consultant on gambling in general in the United States. He was the most prolific author of any of them. His books are all over the place. You see him at used bookstores. But I learned how to play Hold'em from a book and went to Foxwoods and got absolutely destroyed at 6-12 game. And I said, you know what? Let me try stud. I've always been good at stud, and I got beaten there too. But then, being just tenacious, I figured I could learn how to win, and I did at Foxwoods in their 5-10 game, and then moved up the ladder. until I was able to hold my own at 2040 and beat 1020 and beat 510 quite significantly. And then I wrote the book about it. But then when No Limit came, I found that because of the World Series of Poker, because of online poker, that's where all the new players who didn't know how to play gravitated. So the easy money shifted from the low 5-10 game of stud to the 1-2 and the 2-5 game at No Limit. And so I followed the money. And that's why I ended up from stud going to No Limit Hold'em.
Well, if you've been following Roy Cook's and
Yes.
he's moving over from finally limit, and he was a big limit player, but he's finally made the move, and he's into 2-5 No Limit. And he's been talking about it in all of his Card Player magazine articles, and he's finding, that's where the money is too. And as he goes up, if he gets to 510 or if he gets higher than that, he's going to find out it's a world of difference in one evening than he was used to. But he's a very good player, and he's very analytical, and he writes very, very well, and so people can follow that transition.
I loved his articles for Card Player when he was writing about limit.
Yes.
And I love the fact that he's taken his personal challenge
Yes.
of learning how to beat the No Limit game and into his series of articles about being a new player and learning at No Limit. I think it's great. I love the way he writes. And, I've enjoyed meeting him occasionally in Las Vegas at the Wednesday afternoon poker sessions, well, the discussion group that they have. I really have enjoyed his stuff very much.
Yeah, I was invited there a long time ago by Alan Schoonmaker, who I've interviewed on here. I need to get Roy on. Roy is also a real estate salesman in Las Vegas. For anybody that's moving to Vegas, I'll give a plug. Look up Roy Cook or contact me. I'll give you his name and address and everything, and you can use him, and you can talk poker while you go look at homes. How's that? That's a double good deal, isn't it?
Right.
But he's terrific. Barry Tannenbaum was another one that was a great limit player.
I miss Barry. I was fortunate enough to talk to him at length on my radio show and meet him in Las Vegas. There used to be, in addition to the Wednesday group, there was a Monday night group at 7 o'clock at the Stakeout or something, I think it was called. And I remember meeting him there. He was a great player. I mean, Roy was always, I think, a very solid player. That was my assessment. I don't have the ability to really, but Barry was a great player and a great writer. I miss him.
Yes, I worked with him at Poker School Online, and we went down to Tunica and did a presentation down there live to the Poker School folks, and Barry was just good people from the word go. So you started at 1993 at Foxwoods. Is that about the time?
That's right. The end of 92, the beginning of 93, right about when 6 months after they opened. They were really the first poker room of any size outside of California and Nevada. Of course, there were some riverboat ones that opened up in Iowa, but the first major league serious poker room outside of Nevada or California was Foxwoods in 92. And now they have like 102 tables. They've diminished somewhat with the competition from Mohegan Sun and all the other casinos that have popped up in other states. But there's still an incredibly large, popular room. And I love going down there.
Well, you recently were through and went to Maryland Live. And for those that are watching this for the first time and don't know a little bit about Ashley, he took a challenge, and I think he's right now in the book as the only person to play in all 50 states poker. Is that correct?
True.
That's true.
That could be true.
And I think you stopped at Maryland Live as you went through. I didn't get a chance to come down and see you or anything, but Maryland Live does more a month than the Borgata now. So that's a pretty good take.
Yeah, I've tried to make a point of playing in every area of the country where there's poker, and even a lot of areas that you don't associate with poker. Maryland, interestingly enough, Baltimore, which for decades there was no public legal poker, now is home to not just Maryland Live, but the Horseshoe. And I actually, although I've played at both those places, my most recent trip, Al, was to Perryville.
That's where I play every day.
And Geez, I wish I had gone. I apologize for not checking in with where you played, but I was there. It's not nearly though.
Small.
It's not any kind of room like Maryland Live. It's
No.
just a one or two active game place. I mean, they have I think
Okay.
6 tables maybe, but
10 tables, and they do tournaments there, but mostly cash is 1 to 2 tables, and then Friday nights they may get a 2-5 game going, or Saturday nights along with the $75 bounty tournament. So it's not very big, but it's only 5 miles from my house, so it makes it very convenient to go over and play a 1-2 game just to get my beak wet, you know?
yep, I do know, and I know it's incredibly convenient for travelers. It's right, literally, it's 2 minutes off the highway.
Yeah, right there on I-95. I think it's exit 90 on I-95. You just get off, and it's right in front of you. You can't miss it. And they got a new a new casino manager there, and he's going to put an emphasis on playing in the poker room and some more attractions to get people in there. So that's a good thing, because the previous guy didn't care or didn't know that much about poker, and I've sat with him and I explained how you get players in, how you retain players, and maybe he needs to go out. We have a lot of VFWs in the area. They all have poker games there. Invite them in. Have a first responders tournament. Invite them all in. Either give it to them for free the first time, or buy half of their entry and do something for them. But bring them. Let them know they can play there, and you'll sponsor some of their events. Also, bring home games there. Let people that want to have their own games, bring them in there, and you guys supply a pizza or something, and the dealer and the rake is to the casino. But get the home game out of the house and get it there where all the friends can meet. So he's going to implement some things. I've started here at Bully Rock. We've got 42 residents that are in a poker club, and it's just our community. And it's up to 42 players every week. They meet in a league. They don't play for money. They play for just pride. And so they're filtering over there. So we have to start, in bar leagues. We have to start somewhere. The grandfather has to teach us, a father. You have to get inspired to play, and you just have to go out there and experience the loss that you're going to take and regroup through. It's a shame that so many people lose and then lose interest and go away, because the resources are there. They don't find the resources like yourself, your books, like myself, who teach poker, and they just try it on their own, and they're gamblers, not poker players.
That's true. That's true. I've often wondered why some rooms succeed and some don't. And I think the key is the poker room manager.
Yes.
And what they do to make the room succeed. And I think your idea is tying it. The VFW, first of all, for those who don't know, the VFW is probably the largest network of poker players in the United States. You can go into any community, maybe the Elks.
Yes.
But there's almost always a game at least once a week at a VFW hall, if not more than once a week. Some are legal, as yours, the way you describe your neighborhood game is with points. Some are illegal, but nobody is going to go bust a bunch of VFW guys. It's an easy way to find a low stakes game.
That's right, absolutely. And when you're down in this area next time, even if it's Delaware, because Delaware is only 30 minutes from my house, Delaware Park has got a nice room as well. But if you're coming through here, Horseshoe or Perryville, we'll hook up. And I know that you're always looking for a game, because this is the guy that calls me one day, and he's in Texas. He says, Al, I'm in Austin. I got to find a game. You got anybody to hook me up? So I hook him up with Bill Leon, and I think he took you to a home game or an underground game, didn't he?
What happened was I don't know if anybody knows about this, but Texas, which is the birthplace of Hold'em, of course, does not have legal poker, with one exception, and that's down at Eagle Pass Casino, down on the Kickapoo Reservation in Eagle Pass, the Lucky Eagle Casino. I flew to Houston, which is about the most distant airport from Eagle Pass as you can find, but they had a cheap $90 round-trip fare. I flew to Houston, drove 6.5 hours to Eagle Pass, played poker, had 4 more days before the end of my trip, because I had 4 more days before I'd fly home, and I had no idea where else to find a game. I knew there were private games in Austin, in San Antonio, in Dallas, in Houston, but I didn't know how to find them. And so, Al, you were my emissary, and in fact, your guy didn't actually, I don't think he came with me to the game, but he set it up so that I showed up it was very shady.
Yeah.
I showed up in a parking lot.
Yeah.
I waited. I went to some guy who was sitting in a Bonneville. I said, "Do you know Raul?" or some kind of code sentence. And he said, "I've known him all my life. Are you Ashley?" And then we went into the game. It was great. It was just, like a home game.
Yeah.
I couldn't have gotten it without you. And, I knew all these other people. None of them could find me a game. And it took you. So I am appreciative forever.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. While you were talking, I was holding up a coin here from the Kickapoo Lucky Eagle Casino, $1 coin that a friend of mine sent me from Houston, Texas, who goes there, a former student of mine. Anyhow, let's move on to a couple other things here. How do you think that Hollywood portrays poker in the movies?
Well, like they portray everything, which is not realistically for the most part, but entertainingly and humorously. I mean, I love some poker scenes that are absurd, but they're great. I mean, my favorite, I imagine every poker player's favorite scene, if they know any poker history in Hollywood, is probably The Sting. The scene of Paul Newman setting up what's his name? I forget the name of the other actor. He was in Jaws, and he's been in a lot of movies. But setting him up and having himself dealt 4 threes only to lose to 4 nines, and then producing 4 jacks as the winning hand is one of the great poker movie scenes of all time. But it's absurdly unrealistic. And, I love Rounders. I love Big Hand for a Little Lady. I love lots of those movies, but the famous one, of course, the most famous one until Rounders came along was The Cincinnati Kid, and I love that movie. I love Tuesday Weldon, and I love Anne Margaret. I love Carl Malden.
Carl Malden and Edward G. Robinson, and of course
Absolutely.
Steve McQueen. And people haven't seen The Cincinnati Kid. They're crazy. That's stud. That's stud. Uh-oh, I think we lost Ashley here. Uh-oh, the internet. I want to keep talking, folks, and hope the internet will come back. Maybe Ashley's there now.
I'm here.
Okay.
I don't.
Sometimes the internet says Skype is giving you a problem, but that's okay. You're live. But
Can you hear me now? Do you see me now?
Yes. I wish I was seeing Anne Margaret, and I was. Somebody has to go out and rent the Cincinnati Kid and enjoy themselves for an evening of poker and intrigue and everything else that was involved in those kind of movies. I love the Rounders. I love a lot of parts in there. I love when he says, give the man his money, you know what I mean? He check all night.
She's great in that. It's funny, you and I didn't talk about this ahead of time, but
No.
This is one of the veins of conversation I could have for hours and hours. Some poker player, I forget if it was Mike Caro, somebody did an analysis of the Cincinnati Kid and what the odds are for actually having that hand dealt in the way that it was dealt. And they concluded that if you were actually playing in that game, if you were Edward G. Robinson and you were a veteran poker player, you would, or if you were Steve McQueen, rather, who was on the losing end,
Right.
you would absolutely conclude that it was a cold deck, that somebody had set it up. Because
Yes.
the chances of the betting being the way they were, the cards as they came out, would be impossible any other way. And especially since in the Cincinnati Kid, Malden was setting up the deck. He was doing it in favor of the Kid, but you would then know that the dealer must have been setting up the deck to deal that hand that way. And it's just absurd, but wonderfully entertaining.
Absolutely. People that are watching this interview think that maybe you and I are buddies from a long time ago because we come from the same era. We talk the same language. You called me. I set you up with that. Ashley and I have never met, okay? We just share the same passion, folks. And when you share a passion, it's easy, it's comfortable to talk about because it inspires you inside. It brings out this inner, I just want to share these experiences with somebody. It's so much fun to go through the experience of playing poker, the wins, the losses, the people that you meet. I'm sure that Ashley writes tons of articles, and a lot of them are based on some of the incidents that happen at the table or the stories that are told to him by other people. because you get in depth when you sit down and you just communicate with people or listen. Sometimes you don't have to say nothing. You just listen to somebody tell a story, and then you can write an article just based on what you heard.
And in fact, Al, along those lines, when I was growing up in New York on Long Island, we had, poker. My grandparents would have poker nights, and couples would come over. The women would go play canasta, the men would play poker, but there were no public poker rooms that we knew about.
Right.
It was not. I'm wondering if you had similar experiences, or if you had a neighborhood poker room at the back of a bar or a restaurant, or if you ever went up to the Catskills where there were poker games, even in the 50s, 60s, and 70s before it was popularized. Did you have any New York poker experiences that you can share?
Well, I was from Mount Vernon, New York, and there was two bars on the corner of Mount Vernon Avenue. One was called Johnny's and one was called the Blue Mirror. In the back of the Blue Mirror, you could play poker. In the back of Johnny's, you could bet with the bookies on the horses. They both did what they had to do and kept themselves separately, but you knew which bar to go with, and the cops knew which bars not to go into because they were being paid not to go in there to bust it up or anything like that. But locally on our street, we just played. We had just home games. We was enough of us teenagers that would either walk the streets and stay out of trouble, doing poker and doing pool and stuff like that. But we'd be in somebody's basement where they would have a makeshift card table, and we played knuckles. I don't know if you remember the name Knucks, where you do something with the cards, and then the person takes the deck of cards and they can slant the deck of cards, and based on how many knucks you get, they hit you across your knuckles with the deck of cards, so you start bleeding.
The cards,
Yeah.
right? Not with the flat part, but with the edge of the card.
Oh yeah, and they just hauled off on you and stuff like that. But we played anything we could we played marbles for gambling. We played cards where you took the baseball cards and threw them up against the wall and try to top somebody else's card. And if the first one to top a card got all the cards that were laying there. We ruined the Mickey Mantle and all these cards that were worth so much money. We screwed them up.
That's right. I remember we would scale our baseball cards against the wall.
Yep.
And in fact, it's funny how times change. Now, I don't know exactly how old you are, Al. I was born in 57, so
48.
I was 10 years old. How old are you?
I was born in 48, 67.
Okay. So when I was in the 60s, I would be scaling cards against the wall. And I remember very well seeing some of my cards, and the corners were not at all. They were sharp, and I felt that was to their detriment, that they were too sharp. They didn't look like they had been scaled enough, so I threw them as hard as I could against the wall to give them the nice, well-used look. And then only 5 or 6 years later, when everybody started to get into collecting and mint condition and all that, I remember thinking, oh my God, what did I do? I ruined this from an excellent unused card to good condition, and I ruined the value completely on all the cards that I scaled up against the wall.
That's true. We used to do coins too, whether it be a quarter or a nickel or anything. Closest to the wall, to the crack in the wall, got the money. So if you top somebody, you got double the money because you were on top of them, and then you were ahead of them too. So we played anything for money. The only thing we didn't play was what do they call it? The TJ plays all the time in the casino. Craps. Our neighborhood, we never played craps. You see all these movies with dead end kids and Hunts Hall and all these people, and they're always they're playing craps and the cops are chasing them down the street. We didn't play craps in Mount Vernon. We didn't play it in New York. That just wasn't a big thing.
So in the bar in the back in Mount Vernon that had poker, do you know what stakes they played for and what game they played in the back of the bar in Mount Vernon in the 50s or 60s when you were a kid?
Yeah, it was stud. It was just a stud. It was 5-card stud. Most of the time, it was just 5-card stud. There was no hold'em or anything like that back then. It was just usually 5-card draw. Sorry, it was 5-card draw, not stud. 5-card draw poker. That's what it was. And it was
and
like
what stakes? Do you have any idea if it was just a limit 1-2 game or 5-10 or no limit or pot limit?
I don't recall. I think I remember seeing dollar bills, so it must have been like a dollar ante and then something else. But I remember them pushing in like 5 $1 bills, and I said, "Wow, wow, that's a lot of money. You know, I mean, I was a teenager and I worked at the A&P locally and I was making $1 something an hour. You know, see $5 go in one pot. You know, before they even got cards or anything. So I wasn't in there that. I was eating a meatball sandwich one day in there, and that's when I saw it. You know,
I see.
they had the
Very
great meatball sandwiches in New York. Did you see Mike Sexton's going to be on? I'm going to tape an interview with him next Saturday morning, but I'm going to ask him the same question I'm going to ask you. The shot clock. They just tried it out at the WPT. Did you have any conversations on the House of Cards? By the way, everybody, once again, you can catch Ashley on the House of Cards each week. They have a show. It's broadcast on a lot of ESPN channels, but I'm sure if you just put his name in House of Cards on the internet, you'll be able to find that as well.
No, I've had Mike on my show a few times. He's a great guest. He's high energy, he's articulate, and my God, he knows everything about everything. You know, how the WPT got started, how Doyle Brunson wrote his article for, wrote his book and got different people to write articles. He has hundreds, thousands of stories, and the way he communicates is wonderful. He's high energy and articulate. So, what a great guest. I love having him on.
Yeah, but how about the shot clock? Did you hear any feedback?
Oh, yeah. He talked about it, and I think it's a great idea, long time overdue, because, you know, especially at the higher levels, you can't stand waiting for people to move, especially now with the televising of poker all the time. You want it to be more of a spectator sport, like basketball. I mean, you know, basketball didn't always have a shot clock. The game was keep away. You'd have games that you'd freeze the ball for 8 minutes, and it was horrible.
North Carolina and Duke. Yeah. Four corners.
You were probably a basketball fan back in the CCNY days with the cheating scandal. Do you remember that in New York?
I do. I remember when the leading scorer in the country was from Columbia. It was a gentleman that became a broadcaster out in California. I can't blank on his name now, but he and it was a white guy, and he was only like 5'6" or something like that, and he would throw the ball up, and I can't think of his. It'll come to me later on, but yeah, I remember all that back then. The Seton Hall and just it was only local sports we covered. We didn't have ESPN, so we didn't know anything about the West Coast. We didn't know anything about the SEC. We didn't know anything about the Big Ten. It was really right there in our heart. You know what I mean? Just that's our whole world. The Knicks were, you know, it was right there. It was no outside world.
That's right.
There was no contact with it. So I got a question here about playing online. Have you or do you play online?
The answer is I played extensively online back when it was relatively easy to do so. I played Paradise Poker, Party Poker, Poker Stars, Absolute, Full Tilt. In fact, I even played on Planet Poker, which was the first commercially viable one with Mike Caro as the spokesperson. And I enjoyed it. And then I noticed that the games got tougher. I've always been confident enough in myself not to go and play in games where I felt I was overmatched. You know, that to me is my major skill, is the ability to accurately assess my skill versus those that I'm against, and not out of pride stay in games where I'm getting my brains beaten in. So I noticed it first in stud, where I used to be able to beat the 5-10 and 10-20 and $5, $10 and $10, $20 stud games at Poker Stars. I started losing consistently, and I said, that's it, and I didn't play anymore, and I could still beat the no limit games, but then I noticed they got tougher and tougher, and I stopped playing before Black Friday.
Oh.
And now I have not gone on, except occasionally there's a free game. Cafrino is a site. I've gone on other sites occasionally just to try them out. But I'm not at all interested in playing online unless they open it back up. And if I lived in New Jersey or in Nevada or Delaware, I might play. But it's just, I don't want to bother sending money to a site that's not regulated. So I don't.
Well, before I give you the next question, let me tell you one thing about the shot clock. The other night, I'm on a 1-2 table. and I'm on a rush for about 20 minutes. I mean, just the cards are hitting me, and I'm playing any two cards almost because the table's passive, and then I'm hitting a flop. And I went from I don't know 25 down to 680 or above in a 1-2 game. I'm really two big hands where I get two all in the whole 9 yards. My ace king holds up against these guys. And then we get to a hand, and this guy's thinking it's a $12 pot, and this guy's in the tank, and I'm there for about 5 or 6 minutes saying, "Do I call time on this guy?" I mean, it just cooling the whole thing down. I just for no reason. The pot's. I just kept my mouth shut, and finally he folded. I knew he was going to fold anyhow, but you just see the telltale signs on him, and
Right.
we talk about a shot clock. I was really wanting a shot clock at that point in time. It was
Right.
crazy.
I don't think they are going to have a shot clock for cash games anytime soon. Maybe they are, but I think for tournaments, especially where you have time limited rounds, right? You have different levels.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely makes sense. And I would be in favor of it for a cash game, but I don't think that's going to come anytime too soon. Do you? Do you see evidence that it's coming to cash as
I
well?
don't think you'll see it in the local poker room, but I think you'll see it, especially on TV, because sometimes these guys like Phil Locke and everything, they get their head down there, start doing the math, and then he'll come up with some bet like 3,332 cents. He's crazy on this stuff. But some of them take an awful long time, and if you're behind the camera and you're doing a show, there comes a point where enough is enough, and then you're going to have to edit it, and then people don't like, to see the edit because it looks like it changes things. But this is going to bring me back to the question I've been trying to get to. Common mistakes. Now, remember when you moved over to No Limit Hold'em? It wasn't initially when you went to Foxwood. So when you first started playing No Limit Hold'em, the
Yep.
common mistakes that people made back then versus the common mistakes you see now. Is there a difference? If there is, what is the difference?
Yeah. Okay. I think, and I'm kind of looking up and my speculation mode. I can't be certain because I didn't really keep track and compare.
Mm-hmm.
But just looking back, the mistakes that players made when they first started spreading No Limit were huge and regular. That people did not appreciate the importance of playing high value hands from the beginning. They didn't understand that you don't want to play as a rule certain hands in No Limit that you might play in limit. So for example, ace queen unsuited, ace 10, ace blank, king 10, king jack, which are hands that they're playable pre-flop in a no limit game, but in a limit game, but in no limit, these cards tend to get you into trouble. And so people would play what I would consider trouble hands much more early on than they do today. And that was probably their biggest error because it was, costing them their stacks when they would end up stacking off with a pair of kings, but not as good a kicker as their opponent. The mistakes I see players making today are more subtle, but to me, incredibly exploitable, and that is players tend to be way too passive and too timid and tight. If you just have an ABC style of game, which is really what people graduate to who know something about poker but don't really know about No Limit, they become incredibly tight and timid. That is also very exploitable, and I find more of that today than there used to be. So in some ways, the books and the articles that you and I have written and the lessons that we've given about hand selection and understanding pot odds and all that have helped people. But on the other hand, by giving them a set of rules that a new player or relatively new player uses as not just a guide, but as a rigorous framework in which to play, they've hurt players because they don't rely on their natural aggression, I think, the way that they should to become really full, successful, no-limit hold'em players.
I agree almost with everything you said. I think I would add to that the players that started out thought any ace was good. I mean, it didn't matter. It was the ace that they saw. They never saw the other card. They just knew if I can get a pair of aces, I know aces is good. And the second thing is patience and discipline. Nobody ever even talked about that. Nobody said you shouldn't play certain hands. You got to be in every hand. They thought they had to be in, make something out of everything they had. And whereas today, I think a number of people, because of the internet, because of online poker, because of books, because of articles, videos, anything, they understand they don't listen all the time. Mind you, I mean, you and I are looking for that player at the table. We need to have a few of them at the table because that's the soft spot on the underbelly of that table, and we're looking to exploit that. But some of them have picked up on it. Now, they're, like you said, starting hands. Some people will play ace jack and play it soft in early position. You shouldn't even play it probably at a full table in early position. But other people will play it aggressively and get away with it. And then some of the new players will see it and say, oh, if he can do it, I can do it. But they don't have post-flop skills. They don't know how to get away from the hand. They don't know about bet sizing. So it's kind of like miscommunication, and nobody's there to really hold their hand through it. So they learn bad habits. And you and I are looking for those with bad habits. Let's face it. You know, that's what makes us money. If we sat down with 10 players with your skills, you know, you're looking at barking up the wrong tree. You know what I mean?
That's right. We'd have wonderful conversation, but the game would not be so much fun. And if it were in a casino, we would all end up losing to the rake, and we would have a story to tell, but it would not be very pleasant as an experience. So fortunately, Al, there are still a lot of players that I would say are on the early part of the learning curve, and let's hope they stay there.
Yeah. Gotta have them. How about in the future? Any changes that you see poker going to? Anything different you see that they're talking about, that you've heard about on the radio show, that they're trying to introduce? Anything new for our folks out there?
Well, of course, there are new games. I don't know how many of them will catch on, but, you know, Badoogie and Badesi and Res Doogie and all that stuff that's starting to make its way into the multi-game mix format. I'd like to think that those games may catch on. It's interesting to me because now you and I have a lot of time to view poker history personally.
Right.
And we have seen an evolution from draw to stud to hold'em to no limit hold'em. So one would assume that the evolution continues from no limit hold'em to something else. But as much as there are other alternative games that people play a little of, like Omaha 8, like Stud 8, like Badusi, you know.
Of course.
Right. I haven't seen any game catching on to replace No Limit Hold'em, even though all the poker room managers will tell you, well, the reason they avoided No Limit for so long was that No Limit games have a tendency to collapse because the good players more quickly suck dry the bad players and the poker economy goes south. But we've seen that hasn't really happened. I mean, yes, there's been a contraction since Black Friday. Yes, there aren't as many TV shows. But what we haven't seen is what we had seen always historically, some other game coming out that starts to capture the imagination. And it's been No Limit Hold'em now pretty much since 2000, 2001. So that's 15 years.
Right.
And I guess Hold'em's, just regular limit Hold'em, pretty much started to replace stud late 80s, early 90s, but really not until 92, 93. That was only a run of about 6 or 7 years, believe it or not, for limit Hold'em.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look before limit Hold'em and stud, I don't know. So the answer to your question is, as far as a game, I don't see anything replacing No Limit Hold'em anytime soon, in spite of the fact that everybody says the games are tougher. But I am intrigued by team poker, the idea of, and I don't even know how they do it because there have been a lot of variations.
The switch off?
No, well, not that. I mean, I've played that way where you play a half an hour of Hold'em and then somebody plays a half an hour of Omaha. But I'm talking about a team of 6 or 8 people who are playing in a tournament setting, and you get different points based on where you finish, and then the team that finishes with the highest number of points wins the team championship.
Right.
That kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's going to succeed. I know people have talked about it. I know people talked about 5 or 6 years ago, the great poker writer Tony Holden was talking about a duplicate poker, where you'd have players that would actually receive the same hands as they do in duplicate bridge, and you can compare how much money you made versus how much money somebody else made in a tournament money, and you could award your prize based on who won the most money with the same series of hands. But that really hasn't caught on at all. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Al? What do you think is going to be poker 10 or 20 years from now?
Well, I don't know 10 or 20 years. I know that they introduced the game out in California when I was out there, and I've been gone 10 years now, and it did not take off, but I thought it had a chance. They called it, now this is their term, not my term, Mexican No Limit Hold'em, where you got the 2 cards, you got the flop, you got the turn, but you didn't get a river. Everybody got another down card.
Huh.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow. I kind of like that. That kind of combines the end of 7-card stud to hold them.
And it puts a little bit of Omaha in it too, because you got to use 2 in your hand out of the 3 that you got. You can't use all 3 cards. So it was interesting to see it, and I tried it a little bit. I think I played I think they had a 1-2 game that back there on the rail around the Commerce. On the upper rail they have the beginning games a lot of times.
Yeah.
But it just. For some reason it didn't catch on, but it was crazy money that went in on that river because people can really bluff then,
Well, I would think that the real professional players would not like that game nearly as much as conventional Hold'em, because the advantage of Hold'em is with certainty whether you have the nuts every so often.
That's true.
As opposed to 7-card stud, which is you don't know as much because of the 3 down cards. And a true professional player who makes their living from the game wants that certainty. They don't like the gamble. They like the certainty. But you bring up something that makes me wonder. Have you ever played Mexican stud down at the bike?
No, I haven't. No.
Do you know the game? It's 5-card stud, and you get your first 2 cards down, and then you decide which one you want to flip up. And those games are very popular, but only, I found, I was the only Anglo player in the game. They were all Mexican Americans or Mexicans playing at the bicycle club, and they played it completely based on luck. It was as if they were playing roulette or craps. There was no strategy, and if you were just tight, you could win money in that game. I never understood the finer points of it, but just any tight player could win money. They played it with like $100 stack, I think, and it was started out with blinds and antes. I don't recall, but I think that's where they got the Mexican game. It's kind of an inversion of Mexican stud, where you get the last card down, but you end up with a down card where you might otherwise have an up card. Anyway, interesting. Well, I've never seen a game replace Hold'em thus far. I have not seen any game that looks like it's going to replace it.
Well, let's hope that we're both around to see it. And I want to thank you for spending so much time with us today. And you've been one of my most liveliest guests I've had on here. I really appreciate that. Like I said earlier, we have something in common, even though we've never met. And we could go on for days. And I always tell a story about playing 7-card stud and teaching at the classes that it's the only game that you can get 4 of a kind, and nobody sees
That's right.
A pair anywhere.
Hidden. That's right. I got to say, Al, next time that I am going down to D.C. to see my daughter, who lives there, is married, has a condo around DuPont Circle in D.C.,
okay,
I will make a point, unless I fly, of stopping, and you and I will play some poker together.
That sounds great to me. All right, thank you, everybody. Remember, next couple of weeks, we've got Jonathan Little. I'll be doing a taped interview with him on Tuesday. Also, Mike Sexton next week, and then Paul Darden to follow. And then the World Series is going to kick in. It's going to be harder to get some Sunday interviews, but we'll work on something for you folks. There's some ladies over at the Lips Tour. I want to get them in here and talk about how the ladies are perceived at the table. But today, Ashley Adams, thank you from Boston. Go Yanks, and We'll have a good win the last game of the series anyhow. Thanks
All right.
again. All the best.
Take
Thank
care.
you, everybody. This is Positive Poker Insiders. Take care.